All right, so American History 131, still Unit 1, but this is Chapter 2. I was talking about the transition in England and Great Britain. I was talking about the struggle between religions, the struggle between government and king. And here's what you have to know, there's been an ongoing struggle, and you have people that are coming to the New World that are seeking freedom, and they're coming here to be free. They're coming to the Americas to be free. They want to have their English rights. They want to have their equality. They want to have their chance to exercise their religion. They're seeking all these ideas as free men, and they're being promised them when they come here. That's important. Even to the point that at one point you're going to have England pass the Toleration Act. The Toleration Act says, listen, we want people to be able to exercise their own religion without having the will of the religion of the colony forced upon them. All this is hugely important because you have a wide variety of colonies that are going to form along the East Coast that have this British heritage along the way. All that is huge. What we're going to run into is a variety of stories. This is what I wanted to mention. What we're going to have is, as we proceed, we're going to have not only the subjugation and eradication of the Native Americans, we're going to have an ongoing war to displace them, to wipe them out, to eliminate them. But also what we're going to see is the introduction of African slavery. And African slavery doesn't start here. It starts with the Portuguese and then is picked up by the Dutch and the Spanish, and eventually the British will take it over, and it becomes a thriving business for them. It is all part of the heritage of good old Prince Henry the Navigator having people explore the coast of Africa. What's going to happen is you're going to have groups of companies that are going to form businesses in such a way that it's the exportation of slaves. They're going to deal with existing governments. They're going to deal with existing kings and queens and African empires that are going to sell the results of wars. Okay, that's where the first slaves are coming in, is via wars. People were taking slaves way back then. Slavery was a temporary solution to a problem, and eventually people would be released. But when we get the Europeans showing up, they want to buy slaves. They're going to go ahead and sell them slaves. They're going to sell them slaves for goods. They're going to sell them slaves for powder. They're going to sell them slaves for guns and for steel and for iron, a variety of things. It's going to either be you can sell us slaves or you can be a slave. What will happen is they're going to create what are called barracoons, which are slave fortresses, and barracoons are going to be holding cells or holding corrals for the populations of slaves until they go ahead and pick them up. And then what's going to happen is we're going to become it's what they call chattel slavery, right? Chattel slavery, and that this person is no longer a person, but they are now a thing, and we're going to start shipping them to the New World. What will happen is you will gather products, shippers will gather products, they will gather goods in England and Europe. They will ship them down to Africa, trade these goods in Africa for slaves, take these slaves and move them across the Atlantic, either to the Mediterranean or eventually up the coast, pardon me, not the Mediterranean, but the Caribbean. Or eventually move them up the East Coast and the other places to trade the slaves for more goods and take the goods back to England or Europe. Is what they call the triangular trade. The passage from Africa to the New World is called the Middle Passage. And the Middle Passage can take anywhere on a good session, 6 weeks. On a bad session, 2 months. What you have to know is this. Conditions are horrid. They expect a 20% mortality rate in the cargo. That means they fully expect 20% of the people they load on that ship to die off. I want you to think about the fact that, listen, if you want to know what conditions are, while you're listening to this video, crawl under your table. All right? Crawl under your table and sit under there for a couple of hours and see how long you can manage to sit under there and be comfortable as an adult. Your average slave had less than 36 inches in height and no more than about 18 inches of space in which to fit. They were often chained one to another. They could not get up and use the facilities. They could not get up and use the restrooms. Very often they weren't fed like they were supposed to. They might bring them up once a week or so and exercise them on the deck. Things were horrific. They expected 20% of them to die off. In some cases, they expected 20% of the crew to die off. What's eventually going to happen is they're going to ship them across. Usually they take them to the Mediterranean first. They introduce them to the slave culture. They introduce them to slavery. They introduce them to the European diseases in a process of what they call seasoning slaves. They're going to go ahead and send them there for a few months, go ahead and let them get healthy again, let them get over whatever diseases they can get, and then they're going to go ahead and bring them up to the New World and auction them off. A lot of things are happening, but what this is going to do is this is going to create a common bond amongst the African slave community, and the fact that most of all of them have been through this Middle Passage, and so they have a common suffering. From here, we get the basis for things called collective kin, or selective kin, fictive kin, or other terms along that line. They form family bonds and family relationships. The book notes, and so does the study guide, a guy named John Newton. And John Newton's important because at one point he's incorporated into slave trade. He is a captain of a slave ship. And he feels so bad after having witnessed on this that he's going to turn over a new leaf and become a minister and write a song as part of his faith called Amazing Grace, which is where we get that at. This is the beginning of the slave trade, and the slave trade is important because when colonists are first coming to the New World, they're coming and many of them can't afford to come. So when they can't afford to come, they're going to go ahead and book passage, and they're coming as not as slaves. They're not coming as free people, but they're coming as indentured servants. And what happens with indentured servants is this: they come in and they work for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, they do what's called head rights. Head rights are, listen, we're going to give you so much territory, so much land, we're going to give you so much money, we're going to give you a suit of clothes, we're going to give you enough to start your own farm. The problem is more and more people move there, and more people survive that 7 years, because most don't. But once more and more people start surviving the 7 years, there becomes a bit of a land shortage, and it becomes more economic to buy a slave than it does to give away plots of land. So what will happen is the increase in the slave trade will phase out the indentured servitude, and what will happen is it will become a blossoming business as the British colonies here become more of a thriving business. All right, I will leave you to go ahead and look at the rest of that. This is the last video for this unit, and then make sure you get all this stuff turned in before next Monday, folks. Thank you.